There are three strong arguments against any effort to convince people that anarchy is the answer. Three simple arguments. 1. In a world mostly made up of authoritarian states and semi-democratic plutocracies, any state that would be unilaterally seeking to become an anarchy would be very easily infiltrated and taken over by another state or group of states. So even if anarchy were a good thing, which I will prove it is not, even then you would have to bring about anarchy all over the world for anarchy to stand any chance of becoming reality and not backfiring and becoming a semi-controlled state of chaos that would benefit a few and become exploited by any powerful authoritarian fascist entities. 2. Anarchy, at least the so-called pro-social anarchy that certain people promote on YouTube, presupposes that everyone in society can be convinced to abide by the rules required for anarchy to truly live up to its supposed promise and work, in effect function as a true anarchy. The fact of the matter is this: without any democratically elected representational leadership, any society will soon become a criminal thug's dream, where he or she or they can force vulnerable people to give them whatever they want, where they can just steal anything from anyone without any fear of any police or National Guard or any authority whatsoever. And last but not least, there actually have been serious studies conducted on communes, on small groups of people living in a certain village or town, in a community, that shared the same common anarchy worldview, the same ideals of anarchy. And these experiments, meant to see whether or not anarchy would actually work, prove that anarchy cannot work, and that attempts at anarchy lead to disastrous consequences. The fact of the matter is, anarchy is a false hope. And people who continue to promote it end up serving the interest of people whose real purpose is not to achieve any ideal form of social anarchy, but their real purpose is to simply create divisions and confusion in society. Actually, some foreign governments will actually send people or help promote people in other governments, in other societies, to undermine those governments and societies by selling people all kinds of crazy ideas. From communism to anarchy, from fascism to plutocracy. It's all the same thing. It's all fascism, actually. Anarchy, is actually a fascism of chaos. In actual anarchy, chaos rules. Pro-social anarchy, where everybody would agree to some general conventions, some general rules, some constitution which has some rules and laws that are sensible, still could not work, because people would eventually exploit the weaknesses in the system. It's not that human beings are inherently evil or bad. It's that we are flawed. Our brains are not perfect. Our way of thinking is not perfect. Our conduct is not perfect. Our bodies are not perfect. And there will always be those who will feel that they need to tamper with the whole structure. That's what goes on. Even in a democracy, you have that problem. But at least in a representational democracy, in a true democracy, where everybody has a say, where there's true freedom of speech and expression, where your liberties and freedoms are guaranteed to the point where you don't hurt anybody else. In such real democracies, there's going to be problems always. But at least you have then and there some way to protect yourself. You have authorities who should be overwatched by other people. In a real healthy democracy, you need watchers watching the watchers watching the watchers. Everybody needs to be watching everybody in the public sphere. But you also need to have privacy. A real democracy cannot work without capitalism, and it cannot work without some limited form of socialism, which is why a real democracy is a social democracy. And a real social democracy is not an attempt to eventually establish communism or socialism. No. A real social democracy is a form of socially and environmentally responsible capitalism combined with some social protections for the weakest, poorest, sickest of society. Real social democracy is real democracy. You can't have one without the other. So when people say democracy, they should know what they mean, but they don't, because they're not educated about politics. So the answer is simple. Anarchy is not the answer. Communism is not the answer. Fascism is definitely not the answer. None of those things are the answer. Democracy, real democracy, is the answer. And in real democracy, its leaders are not people with unlimited power. Their power is only there to represent the interest, the actual interest of the general community, of the majority. And in a real democracy, you have to have constitutional guarantees that protect those who are not the ones who have the elected power, so that everyone, even the ones who are now in the opposition politically, have the basic rights, the basic human rights protected. Of course, the problem is that today we see plenty of countries that claim to be democratic, but if you analyze them carefully, you see that they're not. They may be relatively democratic compared to other countries, but they're still not living up to their promise and their potential. And without real democracy, we're all at risk. We need ethical society. We need a society that cares about the environment and about each other. We need a society where people can get rich on great ideas, innovations, inventions, on doing hard work. Yes, but not to the point where they get rich and then exploit the weaknesses of others, or get rich by exploiting the weaknesses of others. So again, anarchy is a false hope because it doesn't provide democracy. And there is no substitute for actual democracy. As again I say, just because we don't have actual real democracy in its full form in almost any place in the world, does not mean that that is a bad idea or that is not the right idea. It is the right one. Anarchy is not democracy. Anarchy is leaving things up to chaos, leaving it up to the trust that your neighbor won't turn on you if things go bad in his backyard, if the weather changes or anything happens. Anarchy just is total chaos. It won't work. And there are some people who talk about something they call anarchy, and then when they define it, it's not anarchy anyway at all. It's just another form of a system that has some form of hierarchy. It may not be an obvious hierarchy, but it's there. So don't buy into all these anarchists. They're either delusional and have good intentions, but they don't know what they're talking about, or they're very sinister people who pretend to be anarchists and actually have an agenda. That's all I have to say about anarchy. I hope this will get you thinking, because I'm getting tired of having to try to explain to people why anarchy, as good as it sounds, cannot and will not work, and why democracy, as difficult as it is to maintain, is the only thing worth doing in terms of society. And the idea of giving up on society entirely and abandoning the cities, villages, and towns and living out in the wilderness, that's just not possible. Most of you wouldn't even want to do that. Okay, I have spoken my mind here. Now it's time for you to ask the questions. And I hope you understood what I said.